We're really excited today to have Dr. Randy Kulman here. He will be talking about how video games can improve executive functioning. Randy is the author of Play Smarter in a Digital World. He also is the founder of Learning Works for Kids, which is an educational technology website that transforms popular video gameplay into executive functioning skills. So Randy, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and thank you again for doing this for us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I really enjoy how Division 46 now is really moving into the future and looking at all kinds of technology. And my sense is over the course of the last 5 years, it's been a great opening around the idea that games are an unbelievable source for opportunities for learning for kids and for adults for that matter. And I think that, we as psychologists really should be taking the lead on that. I mean, we are experts in this area, and I think that we want to be out there learning more about this, doing more research and telling people what can work and what can't work. One of the things I do want to say before I even get started is that this research that I'll talk about today, as well as some of my work that we're doing through Learning Works for Kids, it's all in its infancy. So that when we talk about these kinds of things, we're trying to learn. We're actually a little bit like the kids who are kind of playing with technology. We're trying things out and seeing what works. And as psychologists, one of the things that we're really good at doing, I think, is trying to really figure out if something truly works and truly is helpful. And I think that that's hopefully one of the goals that we have. So I'm going to turn off the picture of my face that's up here because I'd like to, and then I'll just move on to the slides. So, okay, now I've got to, oops, sorry, I already went too fast. So first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about games and learning. And what we know is that kids learn from their play. There's been great research around how kids learn. Play is the primary way that kids learn. Play facilitates learning about problem solving, about relationships, impulse control, helps kids to consider the future, helps them with collaboration. Play also practices executive functioning skills. It helps the kinds of skills that lead to goal-directed behavior, purposeful attention, self-regulation. One of the things that I think is really important that people recognize is that video games are essentially a form of play. I refer to them as digital play. So that when kids are engaged in digital play, they're getting someplace and using and doing something useful. One of the issues that I won't really have too much time to address today, but is one that as psychologists, particularly if you're working with patients directly, you're going to hear about all the time, which is the concern about kids spending too much time with digital play. That's clearly an issue. There's some concerns about addictive behaviors. What I would say is that I try to talk to parents about something that I call a play diet. What's a healthy play diet? How do you mix digital play with other kinds of play? How do you make that digital play a part of what kids do? They're engaged in physical play and doing exercise, and they're doing all kinds of other play, but digital play is a part of it. I'm just going to show you this slide real briefly. If any of you want to have a great short little film about video games and learning, it's on YouTube. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to share these slides later. The URL is at the bottom of this page, so I'm not going to show this now, but it's cute, it's good, and it gets right to the point. So we do know that video games can help kids and adults learn all types of things, okay? Academics, for example, a game called Rayman Raving Rabbids, which is an old Nintendo game. Kids who played that game and played it for about 20 hours showed more improvement with reading fluency than kids who did a full year of training in reading fluency. The cognitive skills. There's great research on action-based games. Sean Green and Daphne Babalier have done a number of studies that show how video games can improve processing speed, attentional abilities, job-related skills. There's some great research that suggests that kids who play games that practice surgery skills in games actually can become better surgeons. That's true for surgeons, and it's actually true when they did some stuff with high school kids who were video game players. They were actually better able to use some of the tools that surgeons were using. Social skills. Chris Ferguson from Division 46 has written about this, that games can improve social emotional skills. Executive functions. There's great data on how many games can improve executive functioning skills, and I'll have a slide specifically about that later. They have a lot of positive effects on children. Some of these are things that we just talked about, improving working memory, for example. Tuchel Klingberg has done a bunch of research that led to the development of CogMed working memory training, which is really essentially a series of very short video games to improve working memory skills. We can see how cognitive flexibility can be improved. The game StarCraft has been used, and Portal 2 is another game where we have some great data that we can improve cognitive flexibility with video games. So there's some pretty cool studies coming out that we can see these types of things. I want to show you some of the work that we've been doing here. So I've got I wear two hats in my daily life. One is as a psychologist who's doing neuropsychovals in private practice, and I have a good group practice here in Rhode Island. By the way, you may hear some of my accent at some point when I say car or whatever. That's Rhode Island. So one of the things we've been doing is we've been conducting a survey with the patients who come in, and I see primarily kids with a lot of executive functioning issues, ADHD, learning disabilities, autism spectrum disorders. So one of our studies that we've done, and this is some data from 2013 where we had 64 kids in this particular study, although we actually have quite a few more. What I wanted to ask is something that parents are always talking to us about, which is when their kids play video games, these kids with ADHD, they'll say, well, my kid couldn't have ADHD. You should see him play video games. He can pay attention the whole time. And so we asked those questions. We said, well, what happens, when your child plays video games? And what we were able to find out was basically that kids showed far less symptoms of ADHD when they were engaged with video games, when they were playing on the computer or the internet. And the other thing actually that was really interesting to me, and one that I've heard about time and time again in my work with kids, is that a lot of kids with ADHD love playing with Legos or blocks, and they'll really pay attention and stay focused on that. So we actually got data on that. One of my graduate students, a graduate student at the University of Rhode Island, Joseph Armendariz, I always have a hard time with his last name, recently completed his master's thesis, and he was using some of the data that we have here. This is just the general description of the patients that were in the subjects that were in the study. And he asked a number of other questions as well, asking parents of kids with ADHD how much they believe that playing video games could help their kids in this set of skills here. So if you look at this set of skills, what you'll probably notice is that the parents saw kids getting more help with kind of more cognitive skills like academics and executive functions that involve skills like planning, memory, and focus. The skills that are involved more with behavioral issues, making friends or self-control, they're not seeing as much help with those types of skills. Joseph also included in his study the same information that we were asking before. To what degree are parents seeing kids display the signs of ADHD, whether that be inattention, restlessness, or disorganization? And what you see here is that more than 50% of the parents are saying they're not seeing any of those symptoms when their kids are engaged in playing video games. And really, very few are showing them even in the often or always symptoms here. So in other words, when kids with ADHD, diagnosed ADHD, and engaged in video games, are not showing these symptoms. So one of the things that's captured my interest and why I even got engaged in this whole field and developed Learning Works for Kids was because I kept hearing that. And I said, well, okay, if the kids are so focused and so attentive when playing video games, and that's in great contrast to many other things in their life, how could we use these games to help these kids? So that's really been kind of my sort of passion, if you will, over the last 10 to 15 years. And because I'm really more of a clinician than I am a researcher, my focus has been more on developing a website and kind of building upon that. I've been fortunate enough to have some graduate students come in and help me do some research on it as well. So this is a drawing from my book on executive functions called Playing Smarter in a Digital World, where we did some work to talk to parents about how they could use games and technologies to help the kids improve different skills. And so there is some research to really support this at this point. Okay, there's research that says that what we want to do is we want to make sure that if we're trying to improve an executive skill with kids with video games, is that we need to target a weakness first. We should kind of target the weakness, find a way to assess that. That's one of the things that we do on our Learning Works for Kids website, and hopefully we'll have a chance to show you that briefly later. We've got to make sure that the games themselves are actually practicing those skills. So one of the things that we have done, and when I say we, I mean the group of 20-year-olds that help me who are game players. We've worked together to define ways that games practice specific skills, whether they're practicing a skill of working memory or they're practicing the skill of cognitive flexibility. And by the way, the kinds of things that we're talking about, we're looking for in popular games, as opposed to what happens in some of the websites that are out there, like, for example, Lumosity, and there are other tools out there that are able to actually do a very good job of sort of assessing keystrokes, seeing what someone's doing some pre- and post measures. Unfortunately, those games are not a whole heck of a lot of fun. What we're doing is we're finding games that do the exact same kinds of things as those games. In fact, if you ever go to Lumosity, or if you ever go to some of the sites that are really more brain training sites, they're oftentimes using neuropsych tests that have been made into games to do this. What we're doing is we're searching for games that actually practice some of those same kinds of skills, but they're far more engaging. That people want to immerse themselves. They want to put the time and practice in, because one of the things that we do know is that dosage and duration is important. So the duration, the intensity of gameplay and attention is really important. One of the things that makes video games great learning tools across the board, not just with executive functions, is the idea that they're adaptive. In other words, you start off at one level and you get to the next level after you've learned enough to get this. So you've got to improve. Good video games are challenging. If you ever ask a kid what kinds of games they like, they're not going to tell you that they like playing video games that are really easy. That's no fun. They don't want to do that anymore. They want to play games that are hard, that are challenging, that they die in the game. I think it was 2 days ago, or no, actually it was last week. The newest Call of Duty, Black Ops 3 came out, okay? I haven't heard yet from the kids who come to visit me how much they like that game. I'm sure I will. But I'll tell you this, that if the game is too challenging, you can't beat it, or you can't do things with it, they won't like it. And if it's too easy, they definitely won't like it. They're more apt to like it if it's harder. So anyway, there's also plenty of other research here that suggests how using video games can improve executive function skills. And if anybody would like an extensive bibliography about this, I'd be happy to share that with you. I don't have that here, but I've got a bibliography of books, and we've got a bibliography of articles. If anybody's doing that, or if you have any students who are going to be doing their research in this, I can kind of help them get going on that very easily. So just for those of you who don't really know what we're talking about when we're talking about executive functions, essentially we're talking, it's in today's world is a little bit of a buzzword, but it's a set of skills, self-management skills that help with the cognitive control, with organizing information, that help you with independent, purposeful behavior, and they're crucial to 21st century skills that are used now in schools as well. So these skills are really important. And one of the skills is organization. I'm using a model for our Learning Works for Kids website, and one that I think is very effective, put together by two psychologists, Peg Dawson and Richard Gere. They've written a number of great books. One of them is called Smart but Scattered. They describe 11 different executive skills, and the idea being that these are not brain-based fixed capacities, but skills that we can improve and develop. And so what we do is we find games where these skills, video games with these skills are used. So for example, up here you see how how the skill of planning is used in FPS, first-person shooter games, where they need to anticipate an enemy attack. Working memory is used in some of the fighting games, okay, where you need to recall a series of moves in a battle. I mean, on the control, there's all kinds of different moves, and kids have to remember that, and they have to be able to remember that and be able to use that in the midst of doing things. So that's partly how that becomes a working memory. So not only remembering it, but remembering it and holding it in mind and using it in a particular situation. Flexibility is required in many games. So for example, many video games require that you do one thing on level 1, but if you try that same thing on level 2, you won't get any place. So you're going to change your approach to with a new level. It's sort of like what we measure when we measure the Wisconsin card sorting test, except we're doing the same thing. But in games, it's just so much more engaging and so powerful in that regard. Self-awareness is used when people learn from mistakes. They have to be reflective. They have to stop and think about what they were doing. Self-control is certainly required in all types of video games. You need to control frustration in order to make progress. If you take the game controller and throw it against the screen, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You're not going to get too far in the game. Organization is important in a lot of games. This is maybe important in some of the massive multiplayer games where you need to manage inventories and supplies. So all these skills are very easily found in video games. So we think about this a little bit differently when it comes to other technologies. So the concept that we're using at LearningWorks for Kids is that in many games, kids are actually practicing the skills. They have a chance to be flexible in terms of problem solving. They tried something one way, then they did something different on the next level, and they actually practiced that skill. Or they had to use planning. Planning is a skill that is used across many, many video games. You can find it in probably 50% of video games, how you need to use some kind of planning skill to do that. So the game actually practices the skill. But we're also interested in using other technologies with kids who have some of these executive functioning issues. And apps, many of the apps that we have really don't practice the skill as much as they support the skill. So even something as simple as a calendar on your cell phone kind of can support some planning and organizational skills by giving you a tool that you can use for that. An app such as, I don't know if any of you've used Notability. It's a terrific app that you can take notes with, but you can actually take notes in a lecture, record the lecture. If you can't keep up with the note-taking, either because you process information slowly or you have some difficulties with working memory, you can go back, listen to the lecture where you were, by virtue of tapping on your notes. It'll bring you back to that part of the lecture. You'll be able to listen to it again. You'll be able to add to your notes. So apps serve to support that. Mastery is the third way that we look at how popular games and apps can improve executive functions. There aren't a whole lot of games and apps that we believe right now that in and of themselves help you just by using the game or app to really improve your executive functioning skills dramatically. A couple of examples that we're beginning to see are interesting. One is cognitive working memory training. There's been some mixed research on it, but the data is pretty good that says that if you just use this cognitive working memory training, it's a series of short video games, that you can actually improve working memory, and that skill will transfer or generalize to the real world, that we'll see some long-term gains. Project Evo is another new game that's coming out. There's Achilles is developing this. The company by the name of Achilles is developing this tool where they're actually looking for FDA approval for Project Evo as a treatment for ADHD. And they just had a news release at the end of October about some of their newest research, and it's still not at FDA approval yet, but suggesting again that simply playing this game is improving some of the symptoms of ADHD and in turn improving executive functioning skills. So we're starting to see that kind of stuff, that it can happen just within the game alone. Now I want to show you a little bit about one of the games a couple of games actually, that are really, they're both very well-known games and actually have great opportunities for practicing skills. Minecraft is just an incredible game. I mean, it really is. The problem with it, it's so incredible that kids are playing it for hours and hours on end. When Minecraft first came out, I want to say it was 2009, primarily the kids that played it were teenagers. Nowadays, the kids who I find playing it are younger kids, but it's a great game, practices all these skills. This is one of our playbooks on the LearningWorks for Kids website. You can see all the different skills it uses. Angry Birds, okay, this one is one of the many versions of Angry Birds, okay, this one's Angry Birds Go. Rovio, who's made a lot of these games, they make some really good games that require some real cognitive challenges. For those of you who play regular Angry Birds, you know that you need to plan things out. You know that you need to be flexible because you've got to think about, the structures that you're trying to destroy or the types of birds that you're flying out there and what they can do. So you have to change your approach and strategy. So all those kinds of, many of these games really require that you practice these skills. However, they don't always kind of lead to learning those skills. But there is a reason to want to use them, okay? And the biggest reason is that this is where kids are at. They're doing this. They're showing sustained effort and attention. They're working hard at these things. They're willing to be persistent. That persistence that you might not see in training them to read or do other kinds of things is clearly there. But the games are not enough. And for us, games are a teaching tool. It's not to say that you can't play Angry Birds and learn some flexibility or planning skills. And certainly in Minecraft, you can learn all kinds of things, and it can also lead to an interest in computers and coding and that kind of thing. But the games aren't enough. So, the key is to take what's going on in the games and make it into real-world skills. Okay, that's really the key. Okay, and it's really all about generalization. How do you make that stuff happen? Now, at some point, what I'm hoping is we have more games that are building in those generalization experiences into the game. What we're trying to do at Learning Works for Kids is we build this into what we call our playbooks or our game guides for parents, and with what we call our play nows for kids. In the parent piece, which is really for parents, clinicians, educators, we help them understand the skills the kids are using in the game. We help the adults have a series of questions to assist with some metacognitive skills so the kids are thinking about what they're doing in the game. And then we give them a variety of activities that actually practice those game-based skills to try to make them real-world skills. So that's what we do with that. For the kids portion, we have something we call Play Nows. And what we've done there is we've put games right up on our website. But before the kids can play the games, they have to watch a 2 or 3 minute, what we call Let's Play video. For those of you who don't know what Let's Play videos are, those are those videos that kids are spending all this time watching on YouTube. In fact, many parents I see now tell me the kids spend more time watching Let's Play videos on YouTube than actually playing the games themselves. So at Learning Works for Kids, we've developed probably 100 of these Let's Play videos for different games, where what we do is we say, hey, we're going to teach you how to play the game. But within those little Let's Play videos, we're also saying, in this game, you're practicing these skills. So the kids come to our site, before they can play the game, they have to watch a Let's Play video. They answer like a 3-question quiz, which basically is essentially telling them, here's what you're going to do in the game. We make it really easy. We just want them to think about it, and then we let them go play the game. So parents then know that the kids have played the game. The parents can follow up with that. Teachers can follow up with it. So we're trying to improve the generalization of game-based skills to make them into real-world skills. And that's really one of the keys for doing this. And again, why are we doing this? Because the kids are so motivated, they're so attentive. There's a sense of flow for the kids when they're playing these games. They're really engaged in it. They're willing to practice. They're willing to really make things happen because they love the games so much. So I kind of already described the Learning Works for Kids model, and I'm running out of time here. But basically, within this, we're utilizing a variety of strategic teaching principles. So we help the kid preview the game. They know what's going on in the game. We help them to what we call detect the skills that are used in the game. We help them to reflect or step back and think about how they use those skills in the game, and to connect those skills to the real world. And it's really a way to maximize what kids can get out of games. Okay, if we had our way, we'd see more of this kind of embedded teaching in games. We'd have schools be using this. This is a picture on here of a kid who's engaged with cognitive working memory training. Kids are willing to talk about games. They talk about games nonstop, and if we can get them to talk a little bit about the learning that they're doing in the games, that's also tremendous as well. So there are some limitations to using popular video games to improve executive function skills. First of all, we don't have great research on this, okay? We have some difficulty in tracking the level of engagement and the progress in the game and relating it to the real-world skills. That's where places like Lumosity and some of these other brain-based programs are much better than using popular games. But the engagement and the effort and duration and intensity of gameplay is much less in those areas. Many of the popular games practice these skills, but they're not at the forefront. So they sometimes get lost in the process of what the kids are doing. Another limitation is, up until now, people have been sort of reluctant to sort of kind of buy into this. Although really in the last 4 or 5 years, I'm seeing a dramatic change in this. Certainly in terms of just technology being used in schools for academics, we're seeing that. One of the things that I didn't mention, but really should be mentioned, is part of the reason that this stuff is so important about using games and apps to improve executive functions is that we know from great research, there's been some terrific studies. Adele Diamond's done some studies. Clancy Blair's done some studies where we find that when we teach these executive functioning skills to preschoolers or kindergarten students, that those kids will actually do better in 5th and 6th grade math than their compatriots who were taught math and reading in kindergarten. So we're better off teaching these play skills and executive functioning skills to kindergarten and early students than we are teaching them academics, because once you learn those executive skills, you're better at everything academically. So teaching these skills is really important, and we want to make sure that we do that. So I hope I didn't rush through that, but I probably did. This is some contact info. I think what I'm going to do is at some point I'll share my screen on the LearningWorks Kids site. What I would love to, communicate to you is this has been a labor of love and of passion, and so we need to get, we're really interested in getting people to the site. So anything you can do to help us with any of these kinds of things, with Twitter and following us and liking us on Facebook and sending people to the site would be great. We get, someplace between 60 and 100,000 people to come to the website every month. So it's pretty well trafficked. We're in the process sort of creating a way to keep it alive, because the only way we can keep it alive is if I can do some monetization of it. But it's because I probably have about 10 people working on it at this point. So if you get to the site, you'll see it's really a tremendous asset for parents, clinicians, and educators for using games and technology to improve executive skills.
Well, Randy, thank you so much. And you can tell that it's a passion and labor of love of yours. And let's keep the slide up right now, because then while we're doing the discussion, folks will have an opportunity to be able to copy all this information down. Just so you know, this will be posted to the Media Psychology YouTube channel. And so there'll be many opportunities for people to watch this again in the future and be able to follow the links. So that's wonderful that we have this. I want to open it up to questions. I'm sure there's going to be many. We've actually got the first one from Tatiana, and she asked, how long do the effects of games last? For example, what is the retention rate for learning executive functions?
Well, that's really the crux of the matter here, which is of generalization. I mean, some of the studies, for example, the Green and Bavalia studies that have looked at different types of selective attention suggest that those kinds of skills, are there and stay. There's been some studies using a combination of games and like board games, for example. Halperin did some studies with preschoolers and again with parents engaged with the kids and playing the games, that those skills have persisted. The data on cognitive working memory is mixed. There's some good data that suggests that we're seeing, solid 6 months of gain, and then one of the ways that we really think about using these games, at least at LearningWorks for Kids, is that we need maintenance. We need to kind of continue to have the kids play those games or at least practice those skills in the real world. The premise of this would be that maybe the intensity of your work does not need to be as great if you continue to do stuff. So, for example, if you want to train to run a marathon, you can train to run a marathon. Maybe if you just walk or run afterwards, you won't be in shape to run a marathon, but you'll still be in better shape than you were before. So, that's sort of what we're seeing with that. We do see in a number of the studies, Higher did a study where kids played Tetris. They saw some development in terms of cortical structures, so there's actually structural changes in the brain. Same thing has been true for the CogMed research. The CogMed research, again, has shown the brain grows and develops when playing these video games. So there is some reason to see the potential with this, but right now, again, it's limited. That's why we're so focused on generalization in what we do at Learning Works for Kids. Instead of saying, play Angry Birds and get better at flexibility, we say, play Angry Birds and then try to use that game to get a metacognitive process going where the kid understands that they're using this skill, and then get them to think about that in the game and about the real world, and then practice that skill in the real world. Make that connection, if you will, that detect, reflect, connect process. So, when I'm speaking to a group of psychologists, I'm always concerned about the research that's there. And the research to support that is limited at this point in terms of what we're doing. But the research to support that process of using those types of tools for metacognition and activities for generalization is very strong in other psychological literature, not just so much with games.
We now have another question from Joshua Cohen, and he is asking, I'm interested in the clinical application. Can this be used as therapy? And is there any research on the influence of the therapeutic relationship and the video game as therapy? Or is the research mostly focused on therapeutic value of the games by themselves?
Actually, it's interesting. If I can figure out how to change my screen here, I'm going to show you. This is coincidental that an article that we put up on our website today is about therapy and games. You see that Learning Works now?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so it's up. So let me go back to answering the question. Okay, one of the things that we're building at Learning Works for Kids is a whole clinician site, which you can get to by a footer at the bottom of the page, which has information for how clinicians can use this. This is not that part of the site is still being developed. There's a lot of research out there around using video games in therapy. For the most part, the people who've done research looking at video games in therapy are not looking at it quite the same way that we are. In other words, for example, there's a psychiatrist out of Boston, Attila, and I can never say his last name. It's Jerri, something like that, has been using games to help kids with depression. He's a more psychodynamic therapist, talks about using different kinds of games to help kids sort of act out their issues and things like that. There have been some games that have been developed to help kids with depression. So there was a game developed in Australia around helping kids for depression, for teenagers with depression. So there's lots of ways that people are using games to help kids on the spectrum in terms of developing social skills. There's an absolute ton of apps that are out there now for kids with autism spectrum disorders for helping them with things like facial recognition, not so much executive functioning skills, but a number of skills like that. For us, what we see happening is that we think that the clinicians can very readily use games not as a reward in the session. So a lot of times psychotherapists who work with kids say, okay, we're going to talk for a while, then we'll play a game, okay? And the game is almost a reward. What we want to see happen is we want the clinicians to identify a kid's need for different executive skills. For example, let's say we've got a kid who's really rigid and inflexible. So we want to have them have a series of games that practice cognitive flexibility, and to play a little bit of that game with them as part of their treatment. Have them have homework, basically, to go play this game. Have their parents follow up with the strategies that we developed in our game guides, and have the kid then practice those skills in the real world. So it's basically, we see those games as a tool in therapy to practice specific skills. Like I said, there's other research, and I'd be happy to. I've got, gobs of this kind of stuff put together. I'd be happy to share that if somebody wants to send me an email, and I can kind of direct them in that way. But I think that games are going to be a great asset for psychotherapists. I think that not only will they make the therapists really popular with the kids, but if they use the games effectively, the kids will actually, go home, do this, think about what they're talking about, because the therapist is in a great position for doing this. I know of some school psychologists who are beginning to do this in school settings as well. I think that could be a terrific tool for special education classrooms as well. And many of the kids in special education classrooms, one of the key things that they're missing are these executive functioning skills. So helping these kids develop executive functioning skills by playing video games and talking about those video games, and then practicing those skills outside of the game, is really a wonderful opportunity and a way to engage kids that won't happen in simple talking therapy.
Thank you. And Josh says thank you as well.
Okay.
I do have a question for you concerning, because I look at technology, media and technology, and all the positive ways that we can be using it, which is very much what you're doing here. I still get questioned by parents, by the media, by various folks about the negative aspects of kids playing games all the time, and so they don't seem to be able to get beyond that to get into some of the things that you're discussing. Is there something that you would, some kind of rebuttal, some way, what you would say when you get asked about the negative influences of playing games?
Sure. Yeah, I am asked the same questions as well all the time. It's probably the most common question I get around kids spending too much time playing video games. It used to be violence in video games. I hear less about that, although that's still a concern for me. Learning Works for Kids, for example, doesn't have any M-rated games mostly because of my own sensibilities. I mean, I'm kind of disturbed by watching some of the games. My kids, when they get to be 15 or 16, and I finally let them have all these violent games in the house, they would tell me to turn my head because they knew I wouldn't like seeing it. So that issue aside, there's no question about that games and technology can be addicting, or that people can certainly just spend too much time with them. It's clear. I mean, as we know that's true about television. We know that's now true about kids being on YouTube, and certainly about playing video games. In fact, if anything, I'm actually in the process of putting together a proposal for a new book simply on setting limits on screen time. I'm looking. So if anybody's aware of a publisher who would really like to do that, I've written extensively on this, and screen time is a huge issue. My first approach to this is to talk to parents about what I call a play diet. What is a healthy play diet? And a healthy play diet consists of a lot of physical play, a lot of social play, creative play, unstructured play, and some digital play. But that's not always easy to do, especially in today's world, and especially with older kids who are spending an awful lot of time with technology. And I do think it's an issue. The data out there suggests that playing video games for about an hour a day is actually probably healthy for kids. Andrew Shabilsky did a study over in Oxford. I think about 4,000 kids were in the study, maybe 4,500 kids, were basically what they found, that playing an hour a day of video games was actually healthy for kids. Playing more than 3 hours was related to unhealthy psychological adjustment. Playing for 2 to 3 hours, kind of in the middle. Interestingly, playing an hour a day was healthier than not playing at all. So, and that makes perfect sense to me. First of all, there's the cognitive challenges, and there's kind of the digital literacy skills that kids are using. And secondly, kids are doing this oftentimes collaboratively. They're doing it with other people. They're going, instead of coming home after school and going out to play at their friend's house, they're playing in their basements with their friends in other places. So there's a collaborative piece. So,
Randy, you know what I find so exciting about that? Now, my research is old just because this is something I did years ago, and obviously how we're engaging with the computer and technology is a little bit different now. But I found a very similar thing when I was looking at how many hours people were on a computer, because at the time that was a concern. And the same kind of thing, a sweet spot. So as far as mental well-being, the best was sort of in that in-between times, and the people that were not on at all, or the people that were excessive with their amount of time as defined back then. Had more challenges. So that's really interesting that you're finding that with video games as well.
Yeah, and the kids are spending an incredible amount of time. Common Sense Media just came out with a study. Teenagers are spending about 9 hours a day with digital media. The older study, which is not that old, the Kaiser Foundation study of 2010, had kids between the ages of 8 and 18 spending 7 hours, 38 minutes a day with digital media. So the kids are spending an awful lot of time, and in my estimation, too much time, because I'm probably it's a bias, but I think kids should be outside. I think they need to be out there, and I blame parents for that, actually, because I think in today's world, too many parents are so concerned with safety and security that they're more comfortable having their kids inside at home as opposed to just going out and playing with their friends. So when kids are inside at home, what's more exciting to do? Play a video game or to read a book? Getting kids to read is more and more problematic these days. So I think there are some very legitimate concerns that people voice about this, and it's really all about finding that balance and finding ways to do that. When parents can't do that, sometimes they have to take more extreme steps. So again, I've written about this extensively on the site, but anything from putting a router in their room so that the kids can't get on the internet, at certain times, because they just shut the router off and they're in control of the router. So kids can get around all kinds of things because usually they know more than their parents about doing this stuff. But if you want to get on the internet, you gotta get it on the router. Working with, if the kids have cell phones, that all the cell phone companies allow you to have parental controls over some of those kinds of things, so kids can not be texting at certain times and doing things. So there are things that you can do like that. Preferably you try education, you do other kinds of things, and you kind of get more of a cooperative approach. Parents need to model it too, because plenty of parents are spending an awful lot of time with technologies themselves, and it's do as I say, not as I do. Well, you got to do it too. If you want your kids to have a variety of interests, you've got to have a variety of interests as well. So there's many pieces to this puzzle, but it's a real legitimate one, and one that I think that psychologists need to have some good answers for.
Tatiana asked, thank you very much. Building on this discussion, is there any research being conducted to understand how game players develop effective social practices and skills? And does the medium of where games are being played matter? For example, playing the game on a website or on Facebook?
I don't think I know the answer to the latter part of that question. I don't know if there's any research about that, but I don't know how to answer that. There is some pretty good data out there around the collaborative nature of massive multiplayer online games that suggest that people who play those games and who can be part of a guild or part of a team really develop some skills in that regard. The Harvard Business Review did a study a few years ago that suggested that people who were leaders, like guild leaders on World of Warcraft, actually made better business leaders. And we're better at kind of assigning tasks and designating people to do different kinds of things. So there is some pretty good data about that. And I think all you really, beyond the research, I think if you kind of watch some kids talking with each other about their gameplay and doing that kind of stuff, that's where a lot of collaboration takes place these days. I mean, kids are playing Minecraft together all the time. They're working on projects in Minecraft, or they're playing some of the first-person shooter games where they're working as a team. The new Star Wars game, I'm blocking on the name. We've got a couple of Let's Play videos up on our Learning Works for Kids Let's Play YouTube channel. I'm trying to remember what it's called. Battlefront, I think it's called. Star Wars Battlefront is this enormously huge multiplayer game where everyone's playing with each other. Thousands and thousands of people are going to be playing with each other at the same time. So there are these kind of collaborative pieces that are really built into these technologies now, in some ways in a way that you would never think about before. If I think about this, if I step back too and think about this, not so much about the games, but I think about my own kids. My 26-year-old son, I don't think how old he is a really social friendly kid. And through Facebook and through social media, he has been able to maintain groups of friends in Rhode Island, where he's from, in Boston, where he first worked, and in Chicago, where he works now. And it's really through social media that he's been able to do that. So every time he goes someplace, everybody knows he's coming. He's getting together with a bunch of people. So his group of friends and that collaborative piece is grown so much because of the ease of social media, of doing things. It's really been a tremendous asset for that kind of thing. So I see there being wonderful things that can happen. I also think that if we look at kids who have some social anxiety, kids on autism spectrum disorder, who are on the spectrum, that technology sometimes allows them to kind of get engaged on some levels in social situations that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So it offers some opportunities there that I think can be new for them. And then, of course, the goal is to take them from that and get them more into those face-to-face things, because we do have concerns about the face-to-face communication. This, all of you have been places where you're seeing 3 or 4 college students or high school kids walking together or at a restaurant, and they're all looking at their phones and not talking to each other. We've all seen that. And so there are concerns about that as well.
Joshua says it seems like this could apply to PTSD as well.
Yeah, we haven't done very much work with that, but it would make sense. I think if someone had some expertise in that, they could certainly find some ways to use games to help. I think that the idea of using games and other kinds of technology to help in a variety of ways is really important. One of the things I've begun to do in my clinical work is, as we do these neuropsych evals, we're making an electronic version of the neuropsych eval, and so that when parents leave here, they can access all kinds of technology to help them to understand what's going on. So instead of them, let's say they have a kid who's diagnosed with ADHD or post-traumatic stress disorder for that matter, that when they leave here, they get an electronic copy of a report that has all types of links to maybe videos that might describe this for them, maybe for their kids. So when we have a kid with anxiety, for example, we'll send them home with this electronic report. And the kid will have links to, if it's a teenager, they'll have links to websites that are really good for teenagers about depression. They'll have links to videos that teach them about, so instead of saying, they'll teach them about relaxation strategies or yoga or meditation, instead of just saying on the report, learn meditation, it's like, learn meditation. Here are some things that are made just for teenagers that you'll like and you can use. So we can do that. So I think the idea of using technology in a variety of ways like this, not just video games, but all these kinds of technologies to help people is really important. And it gets them to those places less expensively. It gives them, more opportunities to learn outside of a therapy session. One of the things that we're doing, not so much on this site, but if anybody wants to look at our other site, it's called southcountychildandfamily.com. southcountychildandfamily.com. It's got an enormous array of tools for families to do this. So what we're doing is we're also putting on that site, and some of them up and some of them are not there yet, live pages, so that as we find new articles, new websites, new videos on, for example, ADHD. So here's a video on ADHD that's great for kids to watch, so they can learn about what we mean when we say that they've been diagnosed with ADHD. So we're having these live pages that people can use. So I think that the concept of using technology to help people with mental health issues has all, we've got all kinds of things that people are doing, teletherapy and other kinds of things. What I think the informational piece is incredibly powerful. And we can help them find games and apps as well, but I think the informational piece is a real powerful tool as well that has not been used very much.
Thank you. And Joshua says it seems okay. He says so many possibilities. Thanks, Randy. I really want to thank you again for putting this together for the Division 46 Society for Media Psychology and Technology Research webinar series, and so great to have you be a part of it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you asking me to do this, and it's great to be part of something where I think this is, I think Division 46 really can be, in a great leadership role in terms of all these kinds of things. I mean, we can speak with authority, and I'm glad that people are interested in this, and I'd be happy to communicate with anybody if they want to email me at randy@learningworksforkids.com. I'm happy to send you other information that we have, and would love to be, collaborating with people on some of these issues.
Well, thank you.